Before we start, a quick note about what this channel is and what it isn't. This isn't a recap channel, and it's not a highlight reel. We're here for the parts of Panem that happen after the cameras turn away. The systems behind the games. The contracts hidden inside victory. The lives that keep unfolding long after the anthem ends. Each video on this channel is built to slow things down, to follow the logic the capital relies on, the details it hopes you won't connect, and the people who live with the consequences year after year. If that's the kind of Hunger Games analysis you're looking for, you're in the right place. Subscribing just means you'll keep a seat here when we move on to the next story. Now, let's start where Panem always wants you to stop paying attention. In the capital's arena control room, there's a single dial that can flood a sector, ignite a forest, or drop a pack of mutts right where a tribute is hiding. We're told the games are brutal, but fair. Here's the real question. Was anything in that room ever truly random, or were we always watching a story the capital had already outlined before the first cannon fired? You think about the glass balls at the reaping, all those slips swirling together, and the promise that any child in any district could be chosen. At face value, that's the horror and the justice of it. Equal odds, equal terror. But then you remember Effie drawing Prim's name on her very first eligible year. You remember how often the same families suffer, how certain districts keep producing perfect career tributes. So how many outcomes were already nudged long before anyone stepped onto a train? Because the capital loves to insist on impartiality. Snow talks about order. The games are sold as neutral punishment, a clean relationship between rebellion and consequence. You break the rules, your children pay. Simple. But there is a lot to uncover here once you start tracking the actual law. Rule changes in the middle of the 74th games, mutts with the eyes of dead tributes in Haymitch's quell, surprise feasts that just happen to wipe out the wrong district's last hope. So the question isn't just, were the games rigged? It's, how many and how early were decided? When the Gamemakers send fire to drive Katniss toward the careers, is that rigging? When sponsors are steered towards certain tributes because they're better for capital ratings, is that just good television or a loaded deck? That part matters because the capital doesn't need to pick a winner outright. It just needs to quietly make sure the wrong victor never survives. This is where we talk about the contradiction at the heart of the arena. On screen, it looks chaotic, a bloodbath at the cornucopia, random hazards, nature as an enemy. But behind the glass, every mutt release, every weather shift, every sudden rule twist is a choice. In the 10th games, Snow and Dr. Gall literally test new ways to meddle. Hidden weapons, secret bets. By the 75th, the random quell twist just happens to target victors who inspire hope in their districts. So where's the line between a dangerous arena and a scripted execution? If you design a jungle that drives tributes toward one another at precise intervals, is that just clever game design? Or did you quietly decide who makes it to the final act? We're going to cover the obvious cheats, sure, the quarter quells, the rule reversals, but we're also going to ask whether subtle sponsor control, arena layout, and political motives count as rigging too. Because from Lucy Gray in the 10th to Katniss in the 75th, there's a pattern. What looks random starts to feel rehearsed. In the next section, we'll track how that pattern evolves, and how early the capital starts writing the script for who lives and who never stood a chance. Why rigging the games matters more than who wins. So if the arena is rehearsed instead of random, why does that matter more than who actually walks out? Because once you see the pattern, you realize the games don't end with a cannon. Back in the 10th Hunger Games, the control is blunt. Primitive arena, no flashy chariots. Half-collapsed stadium, Dr. Gall and a very young Snow are literally testing poisons, mutts, and secret bets on terrified teenagers. It's cruel, but it's also clumsy. If a tribute dies in a tunnel because the roof falls in, you can almost believe its chance. Now jump to Katniss's era. Suddenly the games are a polished reality show, chariot parades, styling teams, elaborate arenas with climate systems, force fields, and designer mutts. So why the change? Why invest so much in spectacle if the basic threat, send 2 kids from every district and kill them, is already doing the job? Here's the real question. Why would a regime that controls the food, the peacekeepers, and the media need to cheat in its own punishment ritual? Why risk exposure? Why pretend it's random at all, with glass bowls and solemn reapings, if the head game maker is going to nudge the outcome whenever it suits the capital? The reason is that the games are not about killing 23 tributes. They're about managing 24 districts worth of emotion. Fear, envy, resentment, and yes, carefully rationed hope. At face value, a victor is the one person who beats the system. But that part matters because the system immediately turns around and recruits them. Any victor will tell you the real games start when you get home. You move into a shiny house, but you also move into a lifelong contract. You mentor new tributes. You sell the story that the relationship between district and capital is fair, that anyone could, in theory, win if they're strong or charming enough. You become a walking promise, behave, and maybe your child is the next Katniss or Finnick. This is where we talk about rigging as career planning. If the games are tilted, then every miracle survival becomes evidence of political engineering. Haymitch doesn't just outsmart a force field in the 50th. The arena responds by unleashing mutts and rule reversals, specifically to punish that move. Finnick isn't just a talented fighter. He's groomed as capital arm candy, his victories and his abuses both arranged. With Katniss and Peter, the rule change to allow 2 winners, then the sudden reversal, is textbook manipulation. The capital is testing narratives, star-crossed lovers, tragic defiance, public forgiveness. When they choose to rig in favor of a symbol or against one, they're tuning the rebellion dial district by district. So the real stakes of rigging are bigger than any single victor. Once you understand how and why the capital cheats, you start to see how rebellion was seeded on purpose and by accident, how certain districts were rewarded while others were bled dry, and why some tributes, especially the ones who threatened the script, were never meant to leave the arena alive. In the next section, we're going to cover those patterns game by game and ask which victories were earned and which were assigned from the moment the arena lit up. Our angle, counting the cheating in a fair arena. So if certain victories were basically pre-assigned, we need to be clear about what we're actually counting. Because the arena is never neutral. It's not just kids with weapons in a forest, it's a sound stage. For this video, when we say rigging, we're not only talking about a dramatic rule change on live TV, we're talking about any behind-the-scenes manipulation that meaningfully tilts the odds toward or against specific tributes, districts, or outcomes. A surprise mutt attack aimed at one tribute, rigging, a sponsor pipeline quietly opened for another. Also rigging. The point isn't whether the games are dangerous, it's whether the danger is distributed fairly, and in Panem it isn't. At face value, the capital sells the games as brutal but honest. You go in, you fight. The best survivor wins. But here's the real question. How often does the best survivor line up with what Snow and the head game maker actually want? Canon gives us at least 4 games where the cheating isn't even subtle. The 10th, the 50th, the 74th, and the 75th. The 10th is basically a lab experiment. Dr. Gall, Snow, secret bets, hidden weapons, mentor-controlled gifts. Coriolanus is literally deciding who gets food and medicine. The 50th quarter quell cranks the arena lethality to absurd levels then responds to Haymitch's force field trick by throwing mutts and rule reversals at him personally. The 74th changes the rules mid-broadcast to allow 2 winners, then yanks that promise back when the narrative gets out of control. And the 75th, that pre-written twist to reap only victors, is transparently engineered to remove symbols of hope, not some ancient tradition. Those are the obvious ones, but there is a lot to uncover here because the subtler rigging is almost more interesting. Weather patterns that just happen to push tributes together, fires that drive Katniss toward the careers, or feast traps that reward capital favorites. Sponsor access that mysteriously flows to charismatic tributes while undesirable districts starve in the arena. Once you treat the games as a TV show, with writers and producers, these choices stop looking random and start reading as notes in a script. This is where we talk about the head game maker, Snow, and the capital elite as showrunners. Their job isn't to be fair, it's to deliver ratings and stability. So why keep a clever District 3 tribute alive one year, but wipe out a clever District 3 tribute the next? The reason is always story. Which narrative serves the current political need? That part matters because rigging is a political tool before it's a survival mechanic. It's less about which specific tribute survives and more about what story the capital needs Panem to believe that year. That career districts are naturally superior, that rebellion is pointless, that mercy from the capital still exists, that hope can be granted and revoked on command. So when we start counting, we're going to be conservative with what we label definitely rigged, but bold in asking why certain patterns repeat. In the next part, we'll move through those key games one by one and test the evidence, where the canon admits cheating, where it quietly implies it, and where the showrunners almost lost control of their own script. The game plan: how we'll track the capital's cheating, so to make sense of all that, we need a game plan of our own. If the capital is treating the arena as a script, we're going to cover it the way you'd break down a showrunner's season Bible. First, we start where the cheating is so blatant, you can't ignore it. The 10th, the 50th, the 74th games. These are the ones where the capital practically waves the rigging in your face. Snow and Doctor. Gaul slipping weapons and sponsors into the 10th. The sadistic arena overload of Haymitch's Quarter Quell, the rule flip-flop with Katniss and Peter, and then the totally pre-written twist of reaping only victors. At face value, those are 4 anomalies, but here's the real question. Are they exceptions, or are they the few times the mask slipped? Once we've walked through those, we zoom out to the quieter tools. This is where we talk about sponsors that mysteriously arrive on cue, mutts that just happen to have your dead friend's eyes, and arena features that punish certain skills and reward others. Why does a water-heavy arena favor careers from coastal districts? Why do feast traps always seem to pick off tributes the audience has gotten bored of? There is a lot to uncover here about how natural disasters in the games are usually anything but. Then we start sorting by district, career arenas, mid-tier arenas, and the forgotten districts that only get screen time when something goes horribly wrong. We'll ask, what kind of arena do District 1 and 2 get, compared to 10 or 11? Who benefits from open plains and weapon cornucopias, and who's doomed the second the cameras turn on? That part matters because it shows the relationship between the capital and each district written directly into the landscape. The arena itself is judging you before the game makers ever press a button. From there, we move into pure politics. Snow, the head game makers, and the propaganda machine. Why are some tributes allowed to become romantic heroes or clever rebels, while others are edited into forgettable background deaths? We'll track how Snow responds to people like Lucy Gray, Haymitch, and Katniss, and ask which victors were quietly erased before they could ever become a symbol. If the games are a warning, Who exactly are they warning? Then, pattern interrupt. We'll jump out of the books and into the movies. The films visually emphasize some rigging, fireballs, mutts, force fields, and downplay others, especially the more bureaucratic cheating. Why? What does it mean that the movie version of the story smooths over certain manipulations? We'll compare book versus film to see how even our version of the games gets edited. And finally, we try something dangerous. We put a number on it. Using all that evidence, we'll estimate how many of the 75 Hunger Games were probably rigged in some way. We'll be conservative, but we will not be gentle. Then it's your turn to argue the total and decide how much hope was ever really on the table. Next, we step into the first rigged arena and start counting. Welcome to Victor's Village, why this law rabbit hole exists. So as we step into that first rigged arena and start counting, this is where we talk about why this channel exists in the first place. On the surface, you could watch the Hunger Games as a survival story and stop there. 2 kids, 1 arena, may the odds be ever in your favor. But here's the real question. What happens when you stop tracking individual kills and start tracking systems? Who built the arena? Who funds the sponsors? Who decides which district's tribute gets a parachute and which one gets a mutt attack at midnight? That's the niche we live in. We're not just recapping plot. We're going to cover how Panem actually works under the surface. Why the capital needs the games to look random. Why certain districts keep producing victors while others barely survive the opening bloodbath. Why a single rule change in the 74th games can rewire the entire relationship between the capital and the districts overnight. If you're new here, think of this channel as a kind of victor's council. You're not just watching the show, you're sitting in the mansion afterward, replaying the footage, arguing over whether the force field in Haymitch's arena was a design flaw or a loaded gun the capital always meant to fire. At face value, it's fandom. Underneath, it's forensic reconstruction of a dictatorship using televised murder as policy. This video is one piece of a bigger project. We've already torn apart Victor's Village as a weaponized suburb. We've looked at how peacekeepers aren't just cops, but an occupying army. And next, we're moving deeper into specific games. Haymitch's Quell, Phoenix Arena, the 10th games where Snow is still a student, quietly testing how far you can rig a system before people notice. There is a lot to uncover here, and your theories are part of the map. When you argue in the comments that the 50th was engineered to break District 12's spirit, or that the 75th proves the Quarter Quell rules were never real, that part matters because it tells us which threads to pull next. Do we do a full breakdown of every sponsor gift in Katniss's games? Do we chart which districts get sabotaged weather versus which get helpful feast announcements? Here's the promise. Your questions about which games were rigged won't just sit there. They will shape future episodes. If enough of you are convinced Finnick was never allowed to lose, we'll dedicate an entire arena autopsy to that question. If Haymitch's force field trick keeps coming up, we'll go frame by frame on how the capital retaliates against a victor who exposes the board. And just to keep the immersion intact, remember this. In Universe, sponsors decide who lives longer by where they send their gifts. Out here, you're playing a softer version of the same game. By showing which stories you want more of, you're quietly rigging which corners of Panem get more screen time on this channel. So, with our Victors' Council assembled, let's go back to the arenas themselves and look at the first time the capital stopped pretending the odds were fair. The 10th Hunger Games. When rigging became the point. The first 9 games pretend to be punishments. The 10th is where punishment learns to perform. We're 10 years out from the dark days, and the Hunger Games are already boring. That's the problem. The arenas are literally crumbling. There's no fancy tech. Half the tributes die of infection off-screen, and capital citizens barely bother to watch. So why keep funding this mess? Why not just execute rebels quietly and move on? Here's the real question. If the games are supposed to terrify the districts and entertain the capital, what happens when they fail at both? That's the crisis the 10th Games walks into. And that part matters because the solution isn't make it fairer, it's make it louder. This is where we talk about Dr. Volumnia Gall and the Plinth Prize experiment. At face value, it's a scholarship project. Give promising capital students a chance to mentor tributes and improve the games. But there is a lot to uncover here. Gall isn't trying to save the games as sport. She's turning them into a lab. Mentors, betting, interviews, on-air drama. These aren't upgrades, they're test subjects. She's studying which combinations of cruelty, narrative, and hope keep both capital and district audiences locked in. Coriolanus Snow becomes the perfect case study. On paper, he's just a hungry student from a fading family. In practice, he's already a mini-head game maker. He secretly smuggles Lucy Gray that handkerchief with compact inside, giving her a weapon in a supposedly weaponless arena. He flat-out manipulates sponsors using charm and pity to redirect gifts toward her instead of better prospects. He pushes the boundaries of every rule, arguing technicalities so she can sing, perform, and stay visible long enough to matter. So the tributes aren't just fighting each other, they're fighting the script. Hidden weapons are planted in the arena rubble. Rigged gifts arrive at just the right moment. Behind the scenes, mentors cut deals, the Plinth family bankrolls certain outcomes, and Gall tweaks the environment to test new control methods. Why does Lucy get a crucial gift when she's cornered? Why do certain tributes conveniently die off screen, while others get lingering coverage? Because the 10th Games are less a contest and more a pilot episode. The relationship between arena and audience changes here. Before, the games were a blunt warning, rebel and we kill your children. Now they're learning to be a curated narrative, rebel and we'll turn your children into content. Cheating stops being an emergency and becomes a tool. Snow learns that if you can nudge who gets sponsors, who gets screen time, who gets a conveniently placed weapon, you don't just punish a district, you program it. And once the capital discovers that rigging is the engine that makes the games watchable, the next question is brutal. If they're willing to bend the rules this much for a failing show in year 10, what happens when the ratings finally skyrocket? From chaos to system, how Snow professionalized cheating. Once the ratings skyrocket, Snow faces a new problem. You can't put chaos on a schedule. Not if you want to stay in power. So how does a starving academy student who once smuggled snakes into an arena turn that improvised cheating into a professional system? This is where we talk about Snow's career as one long experiment in odds rigging. Back then, in the 10th Games, he's broke, hungry, and technically powerless, but he learns the most important rule of the whole franchise. If you can steer the odds, you can steer hope. He watches Lucy Gray's chances change, not because she's the strongest tribute, but because he engineers sponsors, gifts, and spectacle to make her survivable. Here's the real question. What happens when someone with that mindset gets the presidency and a permanent head game maker on speed dial? We're going to cover how those student project ideas quietly harden into policy. Mentors? In the 10th, they're experimental, barely trained, and openly competing through secret bets. By Katniss's era, mentors are mandatory, institutionalized, and constantly on camera. At face value, they're support systems for tributes. In practice, they're pipelines. Victors become recruiters, stylists become brand managers, and the capital can reward or punish a district by how much access their tributes get to real help. The same thing happens with sponsors and interviews. In the 10th, Snow literally scripts drama, plants gifts, and learns which narratives sell. Decades later, Caesar Flickerman's stage is a weapon. The random kid from a poor district who gets zero screen time. Their sponsor pool dries up. The charming career who cries on cue. Suddenly, the arena just happens to send them water during a heat wave. That part matters because the cheating is wrapped in rules everyone accepts. No mutt attack looks personal if it can be framed as weather or punishment or good TV. But the games can't be pure chaos. If every outcome feels rigged, the districts stop believing there's any path to survival. If it's too random, the capital audience gets bored. So Snow and his game makers walk a tightrope. They let some underdogs win, but never the wrong symbol. Haymitch is allowed to survive the 50th, but only after they flood the arena with traps and mutts to keep his victory from feeling replicable. Katniss and Peter are allowed to co-win the 74th, briefly, until their romance stops being a showmance and starts being a promise. By the time we reach Katniss's games, the system is so entrenched that even a game maker who wants to play fair can't. Seneca tries to reward spectacle, but Snow reminds him the real relationship isn't between tributes and arena. It's between hope and control, and when a victor starts to mean the wrong kind of hope, the script has to change. So what happens when a tribute refuses to stay in that script at all? The 50th quarter quell, Haymitch versus a loaded arena. So what happens when a tribute refuses to stay in that script at all? You get the 50th quarter quell. On paper it's simple, twice as many tributes, 48 kids, instead of 24. At face value, that sounds brutal enough to justify a special anniversary. But here's the real question. Why does the Capitol need to change the rules if the games are already lethal? The answer is that the real twist isn't the number of tributes, it's the arena itself. Because his games are a case study in structural rigging, the 50th isn't just a forest or a desert with some weapons scattered around. It's a weaponized theme park. You have the force field ringed around the edge, turning the boundary into an invisible execution wall. You have timed hazards rolling through on schedule, poisonous fog, deadly plants, random explosions. And when the story isn't bloody or obedient enough, the Capitol sends in mutts to adjust the plot. There is a lot to uncover here. The force field alone tells you the relationship the Capitol wants between tribute and arena. It's not just a barrier, it's a trap disguised as safety. Get too close, you die. Try to escape, you die. The environment is rigged to punish curiosity, rebellion, even accidental missteps. That part matters because it shows how the games punish any attempt to test the system's edges. So why does Haymitch survive this? He doesn't overpower the arena. He reads it. He notices how the force field works, how things bounce, how the game makers rely on their own tech to control the show. Then he does the one thing you're never supposed to do in a rigged game. He uses the rigging against the house. He lures his opponent toward the edge, times his throw, and lets the force field do the killing for him. It's a brilliant move, but it's also a direct insult. Haymitch turns the Capitol's own toy into his weapon, and in doing so, he exposes the illusion that the arena is neutral. If a victor can hack the environment, then everyone at home has to wonder how many others lost because the arena was stacked against them from the start. And the Capitol cannot allow that question to spread, so they answer it with violence. After Haymitch wins, Snow's regime doesn't just glare at him from a distance. They go back to District 12 and kill everyone he loves. No subtlety, no plausible deniability. It's retroactive punishment for beating the system the wrong way and refusing to play the grateful victor. The 50th quarter quell proves something crucial about rigging. The Capitol doesn't only load the arena with traps to steer outcomes, it also reserves the right to reach outside the arena and rewrite the meaning of your victory afterward. You can win the games and still lose your future, your family, your promise of safety. So if Haymitch's outsmarting the force field earns that kind of retaliation, what happens when a whole arena full of victors starts breaking script at the same time? So when you jump from Haymitch's booby-trapped arena to Katniss's, you expect more of the same quiet sabotage. But the 74th games do something different. They cheat in full view of the audience. This is where we talk about the fire. At face value, it's just weather control, a wall of flames and fireballs driving Katniss off her safe ridge. But watch the path. It doesn't push her toward water or neutral ground. It funnels her directly into the career's patrol route. The Capitol isn't testing survival skills here. It's forcing a confrontation on schedule, because wandering in the woods while your main girl eats berries is bad television. Then you get the feast at the cornucopia. On paper, it's fair. Every remaining tribute gets a backpack with what they need most. Here's the real question. Who decides what you need? Katniss gets burn medicine. Peter gets medicine for his leg. The careers get food and weapons. The feast is a narrative reset button engineered to drag scattered tributes back into one bloody high-rating set piece and to keep the Capitol's favorites patched up enough to stay interesting. And the mutations at the end? That's not just rigging, that's cruelty weaponized as content. The wolves aren't random creatures, they have the eyes, hair, and mannerisms of the dead tributes. Canon makes it ambiguous how literal that is, but the point is clear. The Gamemakers recycle the fallen as monsters to punish the survivors and to give the audience one last horror. That part matters because it shows the arena isn't a closed ecosystem. Death isn't an endpoint. It's raw material the showrunners can re-edit into whatever nightmare the ratings need. But the loudest cheat is the rule change. Mid-games, Claudius Templesmith announces that 2 tributes from the same district can win. Suddenly, there is hope. Suddenly, the Katniss-Peter relationship has a structure. Star-crossed lovers fighting for a shared future. From a production standpoint, it's genius. It protects 2 high-sympathy tributes from early, boring deaths and gives the districts a romance to root for instead of a rebellion to plan. Until that romance works too well, when the Capitol realizes the story is slipping out of their control, the rule is revoked at the last possible moment. Only one victor may be crowned. That's not random. That's the show yanking back the promise it just made, trying to force a tragic ending instead of a symbolic one. It's explicit cheating, spoken into the sky. Seneca Crane is the face of all this. He leans into spectacle, bends rules for drama, feeds the narrative Snow thinks he wants. But his manipulations create the wrong political outcome. A district girl and boy who would rather eat berries than play along. So Snow executes him, proving there is a lot to uncover here about who's really allowed to rig the games. And if this is how brazenly they cheat in the one arena we see up close, how much more quiet rigging is hiding in the games we only hear about in passing? The 75th quarter quell, a twist written after the fact. So if the Capitol is already cheating in the arenas we see, what happens when they cheat in the rules of the games themselves? The quarter quells are supposed to be the one thing even Snow can't touch. But here's the real question. Who actually wrote those twists, and when? At face value, the official story is almost religious. Decades ago, right after the Dark Days, the Capitol supposedly wrote 3 special punishments, sealed them in envelopes, and locked them in a vault. Every 25 years, the president opens one on live TV. Immutable, ancient. Fate, not politics. You're not dying because Snow is mad this year. You're dying because history demands it. That part matters because it gives the Capitol deniability. When the 50th quell doubles the tributes, Haymitch's district can't blame Snow personally. When the 75th happens, Katniss initially buys the myth too. This isn't targeted, This is just the system cashing in a very unlucky card, or so they want you to think. Then you actually look at the 75th's wording. All tributes will be reaped from the existing pool of victors. Sounds clever, right? Except, how do you pre-write that before there are any victors? In year 1, there are 0 winners. In year 10, there are barely any, and their political role is still evolving. You can't meaningfully design a punishment around a class of people who don't exist yet. We're going to cover why that's more than a plot convenience. Suzanne Collins has said in interviews that Snow engineers this quell to remove Katniss under a veneer of legitimacy. In Catching Fire, Plutarch basically confirms it. Snow used the quell to solve a victor problem, not a district problem, not a crime, a symbol. So the 75th is rigged at the rule level before the arena even exists. The reaping pool is now a curated threat list. Political liabilities, popular rebels, mentors who've survived too long. In District 12, that means Katniss automatically goes back in. In Phoenix District, the capital's most valuable propaganda asset is suddenly disposable. The games aren't drawing from the population anymore, they're drawing from Snow's enemies. Then the arena itself is rigged around alliances. A clock of timed horrors designed so victors are forced to cluster, test loyalties, and expose who they die for. This is where we talk about the secret third script, the rebel plan. BT's Wire, Wirus's TikTok, Haymitch's allies from 4 and 7 and 11. The Capitol thinks it's stress testing loyalty. The rebels are using the same design to blow out the force field. So you end up with 3 overlapping riggings: Snow's Quell Twist, the Gamemakers Alliance Arena, and District 13's Extraction Mission. Everyone's cheating. The only people still told it's random are the districts watching at home. And once you see that the Capitol can lie about something as foundational as the sacred Quell envelopes, every random element of the games becomes suspect. If the rules themselves are retrofitted, what else has been quietly rewritten off screen? Sponsors, gifts, and quiet favors. So if the rules can be rewritten, you have to ask, where does the rigging actually start? With the arena layout? With the mutts? Or way earlier, before the games even begin, in something that's presented as pure democracy? Sponsors. At face value, sponsor gifts are simple. You impress the Capitol, they send you a parachute, food, medicine, fire starters, even weapons if you're really charming. But here's the real question. Who decides which tribute gets seen enough to earn that audience choice in the first place? This is where we talk about mentors, image, and a very curated marketplace of suffering. We're going to cover the mechanics quickly, because there is a lot to uncover here. Mentors pitch their tributes during training, interviews, and behind-the-scenes parties. They build a narrative the Capitol can bet on: the tragic lover, the ruthless career, the underdog with surprising skill. Wealthy patrons pledge money, and when a tribute is in trouble, that pool gets converted into a parachute, conveniently timed to turn the tide of a fight or keep a favorite alive through a critical night. On paper, it's emotional capitalism. In practice, it's a shadow game maker console. Think about the careers. Districts 1, 2, and 4 walk in with reputations, glamorous mentors, and a whole legacy of past victors who already have strong relationships with Capitol elites. Cato or Glimmer only have to step on stage and breathe, and the bets start flowing. Compare that to an unknown from 10, 11, or 12, whose mentor might be drunk, traumatized, or openly hostile to the whole system. Same arena, completely different starting line. That part matters because sponsor access isn't just unequal, it's structurally unequal. It's not that the Capitol likes some tributes more, it's that the entire sponsor economy is built to reward the districts that already serve the Capitol's fantasy of the games. You're not just fighting other tributes, you're fighting decades of branding We see the prototype of this in the 10th Games. One ambitious student, Coriolanus Snow, quietly rigs betting and gifts for Lucy Gray. He nudges sponsors, sneaks her a handkerchief of rat poison, turns a single vial of medicine into the difference between death and survival. If one underfed academy kid can bend the outcome with a few favors and a sympathetic dean, what happens once that system scales up into a polished industry with corporate-style sponsors, VIP boxes, and game makers tracking ratings in real time? So is that cheating, or just part of the game? The Capital's genius is that they never have to answer that question. They frame gifts as pure audience will, as if the game makers are just delivery drivers. But timing a parachute so it arrives the second a career is cornered, or conveniently delaying aid to a tribute the Capital wants gone, is indistinguishable from moving a pack of mutts. And once sponsor bias sits on top of arena design, mutt releases, and mid-game rule changes, you start to see the real pattern. Almost no games are a fair contest of skill. They're a managed story with preferred winners. The only remaining question is how far that management goes, and what happens when a tribute refuses to play their assigned role. Mutts, weather, and natural disasters. The arena as loaded dice. If sponsor gifts are the visible strings, the arena itself is the hidden hand up the puppet. You're told it's just terrain, just bad luck. But here's the real question. When the trees start spitting acid, or the sky catches fire, on cue, how much of that is nature, and how much is a script? This is where we talk about mutts, weather, and so-called natural disasters. At face value, every game has hazards. That's the promise. But there is a lot to uncover here, because the environment isn't a backdrop, it's a control panel the game makers spin, dial, and weaponize against specific people from specific districts. Take the 74th. That wall of fire doesn't just appear somewhere in the woods. It appears exactly where Katniss is, after she's slipped too far from the main action. The flames and fireballs herd her toward the careers, burn her leg to slow her down, and conveniently push everyone into one cinematic clash. That's not weather, that's editing. Same arena, same principle. Endgame. The Mutt Wolves don't just rise when it's dark and spooky. They arrive the second Katniss, Peter, and Cato reach the cornucopia, and they keep coming until Cato is physically forced onto that metal horn. Their timing turns what could have been a slow siege into a brutal televised showdown. The natural predators are literally on the game maker's schedule. Jump to the 75th. The poisonous fog doesn't drift randomly. It rolls straight at the Alliance, targeting a cluster that includes Katniss, Peter, Finnick, and Mags. Then the spinning jungle? That's not a storm front. That's the arena itself, rotating to disorient tributes, break alliances, and separate the strong from the vulnerable. You can almost see Plutarch flicking switches in the control room. Even the animal mutts follow this pattern. The Jabberjay audio torture is calibrated to specific victors' loved ones. The monkey mutts attack at dawn when the Beach Alliance is briefly off guard, and they focus on the weakest link, Wiress, and then Peter, forcing the others to reveal who they'll risk themselves to protect. Each random assault doubles as a personality test for the Capital audience. And then there's the 50th, Haymitch's Quarter Quell. The arena is packed with deadly traps from the start, razor wire plants, instant death force fields, weaponized birds. When Haymitch uses the force field as a weapon, the arena suddenly feels personal. The Capital responds with extra mutts and escalating hazards until they're essentially trying to delete the tribute who outsmarted them. That part matters because it shows the relationship between ingenuity and punishment. Outplay the arena, and the arena will try to erase you. So what does that do to a tribute's mind? You enter believing the arena is neutral, that if you're skilled enough, you have a shot at becoming a victor. Then you realize invisible hands can tilt the battlefield at any second. A storm can appear on your head. A feast can spawn at your feet. Or not. The absence of intervention is its own kind of rigging. And once you see the arena as a control panel, the conclusion is hard to escape. Every games is at least partially rigged, even without a flashy rule change. The only remaining question is, if the environment is scripted, what about the tributes themselves? And how early does that scripting start? District favorites versus problem children. Who the capital boosts? If the arena is a control panel, then the tributes are presets. And some of them come preloaded as winners, or as problems to be solved. At face value, every district sends 2 names, and the games start fair. But here's the real question. Why do the same places keep producing confident, camera-ready killers, while others send kids who've never touched a real weapon? This is where we talk about the career districts versus everyone else, because there is a lot to uncover here. Districts 1, 2, and 4 grow up in a completely different relationship to the games. You're told from childhood that volunteering is an honor. You train illegally in combat academies. Your mentors are polished victors who know exactly how to milk sponsors, play the interviews, and negotiate with capital elites. By the time a career steps off the train, the audience already knows the narrative. This is a front runner, a safe bet for your money and your admiration. Compare that to districts 10, 11, and 12. No training centers, no cultural script about glory, just fear, hunger, and a long memory of being punished. Rue and Thresh aren't marketed as glamorous. They're framed as tragic. Katniss is an anomaly precisely because 12 so rarely wins that her district barely understands how sponsors work. The Capitol calls this tradition, but functionally it's pre-selection. You're not just entering the arena, you're entering a rigged casting call. That part matters because once the careers are established as favorites, the system keeps rewarding that status. Sponsors gravitate toward them because they look competent on camera. Gamemakers design bloodbaths that reward groups who can coordinate and access the cornucopia. Even the way commentators talk about them builds this promise of inevitability. Of course, a career will win. Why would you hope for anything else? On the other side, you have what we could call the problem districts. District 11, with its history of uprisings and harsh peacekeeper crackdowns. District 12, which produces victors who refuse to stay in their lane. Haymitch with his force field trick. Katniss and Peeta with their berries. Once a district is associated with rebellion or inconvenient symbolism, the rigging shifts from favoritism to sabotage. We're going to cover overt sabotage in more detail later, but the pattern is already clear. Haymitch embarrasses the Capitol in the 50th. Peacekeepers murder his family and anyone he loves. Katniss and Peeta threaten a double suicide in the 74th. Snow goes straight for their families, their friends, their entire district, and when that still doesn't fix the narrative problem, the 75th Quell suddenly chooses only victors, conveniently pulling almost every rebel symbol back into the killing field. So why does this matter for the question of rigging? Because when whole districts are branded as winners or losers, the games stop being an open contest and turn to ritualized confirmation bias. Careers are there to validate the system. Problem districts are there to be punished on live television. Once you see that, you have to ask, if the favorites and the threats are chosen long before the reaping, what does that say about every so-called underdog victory we've ever seen? District 12, the baseline for a non-rigged games. So if the favorites and the threats are pre-selected, where does that leave the districts that are supposedly irrelevant? This is where we talk about District 12, because on paper, it should be our control group, the Forgotten Coal District. No career culture, no training center, just underfed kids pulled out of a mine town and thrown into the arena. At face value, 12 is what the capital points to when they want to prove the games are fair. Anyone can win, right? Even the starving seam kid. You're meant to think, if a tribute from the worst district can make it, then the system can't be rigged. But here's the real question. When you actually look at District 12's victors, do you see meritocracy or emergency damage control? Start with the basics. For 74 years, 12 barely produces winners. No line of volunteer careers, no training scores that blow the capital away. The reaping is a lottery in the most brutal sense, because almost nobody volunteers. The only reason you'd raise your hand is to save someone you love, not to chase glory. That part matters because it means 12 should give us the purest version of the games. No district level grooming, no pre-arena sponsorship networks, just raw chance. The lone victor between the dark days and Katniss. His quarter quell is supposedly a special anniversary, but the arena is overcrowded with traps, poisons, and that force field edge. When he uses the force field to kill the last career, the capital doesn't applaud cleverness. They retaliate. They kill everyone he loves back home. The message is clear. Your win was not the outcome we wanted. And the 50th's over-designed arena starts to look less random and more like an experiment in how far they can push a district that was never meant to produce a symbol. Jump to the 74th. Katniss's volunteer moment breaks 12's entire pattern. She's not a career. She's not chasing the promise of a victor's village mansion. She's just trying to keep Prim from dying on live television. The capital immediately reframes that impulse. Suddenly, the non-career volunteer becomes half of a star-crossed lover's package. The rule change to allow 2 winners, the feast with the backpack trap, the mutts driving them to the cornucopia. Every intervention pushes you to read her choice as romance, not rebellion. And notice what was happening long before any of them stepped on a train. District 12's neglect is its own form of rigging. Chronic hunger, no formal training, no real medical care. That's not a neutral starting line. It's a structural handicap that shrinks the pool of viable tributes before the names are ever drawn. The capital doesn't have to sabotage 12 in the arena if it's already done the work in the district. So if even the irrelevant district's rare victories only happen under extreme manipulation, what does that imply about every other underdog story we've been sold? And what happens when a district refuses to play its assigned role? The career districts, when cheating becomes tradition, so what happens when a district doesn't refuse its assigned role at all, but leans into it so hard that cheating becomes culture? This is where we talk about the career districts. Districts 1, 2, and 4 aren't just good at the games. They run unofficial feeder programs. You get tributes who volunteer, who've been training since childhood in illegal combat academies that everyone pretends not to see. At face value, they're just ambitious kids chasing glory. But here's the real question. When the law is only enforced on some districts, is that still law, or is it design? Think about the relationship between the capital and these places. Their whole district identity is aligned with capital needs. They throw parades for victors. They hang weapons on the wall instead of school awards. Children grow up watching games footage, not as a warning, but as a highlight reel. The message is simple. The arena isn't a punishment, it's a promotion track. That part matters because it turns volunteering into a ritual, not an exception. In 12, Katniss's choice is shocking. In 1 and 2, it's Tuesday. The reapings there are almost job interviews, with older, stronger teams pushing to the front. You don't have to rig the bowl if the random name is never drawn. The capital can shrug and say, they chose this, while quietly enjoying a steady stream of photogenic killers who understand camera angles. And those careers aren't walking in empty-handed. We're going to cover sponsor manipulation later, But careers start the games with structural advantages baked in. They've had access to weapons, obstacle courses, and nutrition their whole lives. Their mentors are serial victors with decades of arena experience, not a single traumatized drunk who won once in a fluke. When a District 2 mentor explains how to work the cornucopia, that's institutional memory speaking. On top of that, their image is pre-sold. The capital audience already knows to root for the jeweled tribute from 1, the stone-faced peacekeeper adjacent, from 2, the golden sea warrior from 4. Sponsors don't have to think. The narrative has been written for them. The games promise equal odds, but the camera lingers on some districts longer than others, and money follows the camera. Here's the pattern interrupt. The real rigging starts long before mutts and rule changes. It starts in nursery rhymes, in which districts are told to fear the arena, and which are told to dream about it. Snow doesn't need to cheat the arena if he's already cheated childhood. So why allow volunteering at all? Because it's the perfect alibi. If the most dangerous tributes raise their hands, the capital can claim the games are meritocratic. Hope becomes a weapon. The hope of wealth, of Victor's village, of never facing the reaping again. But once some districts are effectively running talent pipelines, and others are being starved into submission, the idea that every tribute steps onto that platform with the same chance to win is a transparent lie. And if the careers are the teachers' pets of the system, what does the capital do when even its favorites start slipping out of control? The invisible middle, districts 5, 6, 9, and 10. Even its favorites start slipping out of control. Then you look at the districts that aren't favorites at all. Districts 5, 6, 9, and 10 sit in this strange middle zone. Not glamorous career factories, not openly rebellious symbols like 11 and 12. They're essential to the system, but you barely hear their names. And here's the real question. Why does the story forget them almost as much as the capital does? At face value, that's just Suzanne Collins focusing on Katniss's world. We stay close to 12, we visit 11, we hear endless commentary on 1, 2, and 4 because they produce the flashy tributes. But there is a lot to uncover here when you notice how empty the record is for 5, 9, and 10. Their victors are unnamed, their games go undescribed, their children die on camera and then vanish into recap montages. That part matters because in a show built on attention, not getting attention is its own kind of rigging. Take District 6. The one detail that sticks in the narrative is the morphling addicts in the quarter quell. Former victors, people who technically beat the games and then were so broken by the trauma and the capital's medical system that they disappear into drug dependency. You're told they're from transportation, constantly moving, constantly useful, and yet the only time the cameras really linger on them is to turn their suffering into a tragic spectacle. So what does that tell you about their odds in the average year? If your district is known for exhausted workers and chemically numbed victors, are sponsors lining up to invest? Or does the audience quietly assume that a 6 tribute is there to pad the kill count while the real story happens somewhere else? This is where we talk about industries. District 5 runs power. District 6 runs transport. District 9 handles grain. 10 handles livestock. The entire Hunger Games infrastructure literally depends on them. Trains, lighting, food, even the mutts feed. But none of that reads as heroic on camera. It's background labor. It doesn't sell capital fashion or romantic narratives the way a career or a coal miner with a tragic backstory does. So their games are probably rigged through a mission. Less screen time means fewer sponsors. Fewer sponsors means fewer life-saving gifts. And when the head game maker designs an arena, whose skills does it highlight? The swimming, climbing, weapon proficiency of 1, 2, and 4, or the symbolic value of an underdog from 11 or 12. The middle districts are useful, but not useful for propaganda. Imagine if we had a full breakdown of a District 5 victor's win. How many times did a camera cut away right before they did something impressive? How many potential sponsors never even saw their face? How many rule tweaks or muck releases were calibrated to push the narrative back toward a career or a politically convenient underdog? On paper, the capital can claim the arena is neutral. In practice, a board producer deciding which tribute gets 30 seconds of air might be the quietest, most bureaucratic form of cheating in the entire games. And if that's how they treat the invisible middle, what happens when a tribute from one of those districts suddenly becomes interesting? Why allow volunteers at all? The meta question, and if that's how they treat the invisible middle, what happens when a tribute from one of those districts suddenly becomes interesting? Here's the twist. The moment a tribute becomes interesting, the whole logic of the game starts to wobble. Because if this is supposed to be pure punishment, a yearly reminder that the capital owns your children, why is there any room at all for someone to turn that punishment into a career path? At face value, the system should be simple. 2 names, no escape. No substitutions. You get reaped, you go. End of story. No volunteers, no training academies, no mentors explaining sponsor strategy like this is some twisted internship program. So why does the capital allow it? Why does a district even have the vocabulary for career tribute in the first place? Imagine a different model, a pure terror version of the games. Every tribute is underfed, deliberately untrained, pulled from the poorest families who already took tesserae. No one is allowed to prepare. No one is allowed to volunteer. There are no parades, no interviews, no stylists turning you into walking fashion statements. Just children dragged from the seam or the hob equivalent in every district, tossed into an arena and erased. That would be horrifying. It would also be strategically boring. Because here's the real question. What does the capital actually gain by letting some tributes embrace the arena? When you allow Districts 1, 2, and 4 to build training halls, when you let kids dream of being the next Finnick or Glimmer, you're not just tolerating ambition, you're cultivating it, then televising it in HD. There is a lot to uncover here in that relationship between terror and entertainment. The games stop being only a warning and become a promise. Not a generous one, but a tiny, razor-thin promise that if you train hard enough, if your district plays along, you might win a house, food for your people, Victor's Village. That part matters because it turns fear into aspiration. And once you have aspiration, you get ratings. You get capital citizens debating which career has the best odds, which underdog has heart, which stylists nailed the fire dress. You get hero worship, trading cards, parties themed after a specific victor's games. The arena becomes a fashion week with murder. So why even allow volunteers? Because volunteering and career culture are pressure valves. They give certain districts a stake in the system. If you're from a career district, the games are still terrifying, but they're also your one socially approved ladder out of obscurity. Your mayor, your merchants, your mentors all quietly benefit when a local tribute wins. This is where we talk about stability. A system that only offers fear eventually runs out of things to take. A system that offers a microscopic chance at glory can keep people chasing it for decades. Snow understands what he tells Seneca. A little hope is more dangerous than none, but it's also more useful. So what happens when that little hope collides with rigging, and the audience starts to notice the odds were never meant to be in anyone's favor? Hope versus fear, Snow's favorite kind of cheating. The moment Snow tells Seneca, hope, it is the only thing stronger than fear, he's not being poetic. He's giving you the operating manual for the games. Too little hope, and the districts shut down. Too much, and they burn the capital to the ground. So here's the real question. Where does rigging fit into that balance? Because once you notice how many arenas are tilted, you realize the cheating isn't just about who wins, it's about how. Snow doesn't want a perfect machine of fear. He wants a controlled leak of hope. Enough that a kid from your district can say, if Lucy Gray did it, if Hamish did it, maybe I could too. Not likely, but maybe. This is where we talk about those underdog victories. Lucy Gray in the 10th, surviving because her mentor secretly rigs gifts and weapons. Hamish in the 50th, outsmarting a murder arena so stacked it has to be corrected with mutts and assassinations back home. Katniss and Peter in the 74th, saved by a mid-games rule change that suddenly allows 2 winners from the same district. At face value, these look like cracks in the system, proof that the odds really can flip. But there is a lot to uncover here. Snow lets those wins stand because they are useful. A surprise victor from a poor district is worth more to him as propaganda than another anonymous corpse. A clever teen beating the arena tells every viewer, the games are brutal, yes, but they're also fair, in theory. That part matters because a population that believes in theoretical fairness will police itself, always wondering if next year might finally be their turn. Contrast that with mass executions. A firing squad in the square kills faster. It sends a cleaner message. But it doesn't sell a story. The Hunger Games are the Capitol saying, we could just kill you. Instead, we're giving you a chance. It's the same death, repackaged as opportunity. Executions end hope. The games monetize it. So all those systems we're going to cover, sponsors, career training, surprise rule changes, what are they really doing? They're manufacturing that tiny drip of hope. Sponsors promise that if your tribute plays well, the right gift might arrive. Career culture promises that if your district trains hard enough, you can dominate the arena. Rule changes promise that if the story gets good, the Capitol might even bend the rules for you. None of that is about fairness. It's about keeping you emotionally invested in a game you were never meant to win. And that's the most dangerous part of the rigging, not who dies, but the narrative of why. The Capitol decides which deaths were noble, which were stupid, which victor earned survival. They cheat in the arena, then they cheat in the edit. So what happens when a victor refuses that script and starts telling a different story back to the districts? Concrete payoffs. What a rigged win actually buys you. So when a victor starts pushing back against the Capitol's script, what are they actually risking? This is where we talk about the concrete payoff of playing along. Winning the Hunger Games earns you a mansion in the victor's village. On paper, that sounds simple. At face value, it's just a house. But walk through District 12 in your head. In the seam, Katniss wakes up in a shack with a leaky roof, coal dust in the air, no steady heat, and cupboards that are usually empty. Then she moves into a place with hot running water, a bathroom that works every day, a closet full of clothes, and a pantry that refills itself so reliably she and Peter have to invent problems to solve. The difference isn't subtle, it's architectural propaganda. The mansion is the nicest place in town, on purpose full power when the rest of the district loses electricity, central heating when people outside are burning furniture, real coffee, real sugar, real meat. There is a lot to uncover here, because the Capitol isn't just rewarding one victor, it's building a permanent, visible ad for obedience. Every kid walking past those empty houses sees a promise. Survive the arena and you never starve again. And it's not just the house. The moment a tribute wins, the district lights up. You get feasts in the square, music, banners, and crucially, food parcels. In 12, those deliveries mean people who were on the edge of dying that winter suddenly have grain and oil and maybe even meat. For one brief window, everyone's standard of living spikes. Your neighbor's child is still dead in the arena, but your own child is eating stew for the first time in months. That part matters because it ties your survival to the game's success. Here's the real question. Why does a community that hates the games still crowd around the screens every year? One reason is mourning and fear, but another is hope. Not hope that the system ends, hope that this time your district gets the windfall. The capital has literally monetized grief. Katniss's own perspective makes that relationship brutally clear. She walks from the seam to Victor's village, and it's a straight line through inequality. Cracked streets, starving faces, then suddenly manicured lawns and 12 identical mansions on a hill, looking down on everyone else. Children can see the luxury, but they can't touch it. It's aspirational distance. So the games get reframed. You're not supposed to ask, why do we have this system at all? You're nudged to ask, when will we get our victor? And once the prize is this big, rigging becomes the perfect lever. If Snow can quietly tilt sponsors, mutts, or rule changes toward or away from a tribute, he's not just deciding who lives, he's deciding which district gets a year of full bellies and a permanent symbol of the capital's generosity. And what happens when districts start to realize that even this payoff can be revoked, twisted, or weaponized the moment a victor steps out of line? Book versus movie. How the adaptations show the cheating, and that's where the adaptations quietly step in as co-conspirators. On the page, you live inside Katniss's head while the games are being tilted. You feel every sponsor gift as a rigged vote. She's counting parachutes, wondering who in the capital is paying, and why the medicine arrives exactly when the romance storyline needs to spike. At face value, it's survival. But here's the real question. How much of that hope is just Snow and the Gamemakers testing how far they can push the audience toward a preferred victor? In the books, there is a lot to uncover here because Katniss is constantly suspicious of motive. When the rule change happens in the 74th games, she doesn't just celebrate. She thinks about how convenient it is that the star-crossed lovers get a second act. When the feast is announced, she reads it as a trap designed for maximum bloodshed and ratings. The text keeps reminding you, the arena is a political instrument, not a neutral battleground. The movies shift that perspective. They pull you out of Katniss's mind and drop you into the control room. Suddenly, rigging isn't a suspicion. It's a holographic map, a swarm of mutts dragged in by a fingertip, a wall of fire literally pushed toward District 12's girl on the touch screen. We're going to cover exactly how blatant that is. You watch Seneca Crane spin the arena to herd tributes together, or Plutarch dial up lightning and fog in Catching Fire. The cheating becomes a visual spectacle. That part matters because it changes the relationship between you and the capital audience. In the books, you share Katniss's paranoia about unseen deals, Haymitch negotiating for broth instead of bread, sponsors choosing between tributes based on interviews, Snow leaning on Gamemakers off-page. You even get the political subtext of Haymitch's punishment after his quarter-quell stunt, his loved ones killed as payback for outsmarting the force field. The message is, step out of line, and the rigging follows you home. On screen, a lot of that gets softened or streamlined. We barely see the mechanics of sponsor negotiations. Haymitch's post-games punishment is only hinted at, not dissected. District favoritism is reduced to a quick impression of glamorous careers versus scrappy underdogs, instead of the book's detailed pattern of which districts the capital quietly rewards or starves of gifts. The films keep the big twists, the rule change, the firewall, the mutts, but sand down the slow, systemic cheating. So why does that matter? Because the movies end up mirroring the capital's own strategy. They have to balance spectacle with how much overt cheating the audience will accept before the whole promise of the games collapses. Show you the flashy rigging, hide the boring bureaucratic cruelty. And here's the uncomfortable question. When you're staring at a giant firewall chasing Katniss through the forest, are you supposed to forget the quieter rigging that started long before she ever stepped into the arena? Hold on to that thought, because the next games we're about to examine make that tension almost impossible to ignore. Inside the control room, how a head game maker thinks. So if the firewalls and rule changes are the flashy rigging, what does it look like from the other side of the glass? Inside the control room, where one bored technician can nudge a joystick and change which district even has a future victor, this is where we talk about the head game maker's brain. Take Seneca Crane first. At face value, he's the perfect company man. Stylish beard, confident, obsessed with ratings. His whole relationship to the games is keep them watching. That's why you get the 74th Arena as a kind of lethal theme park, with fire bursts to drive Katniss towards the careers, tracker-jacker nests dropped at just the right moment, and the feast at the cornucopia when things slow down. You can almost hear the control room conversation. The screens show a stalemate. Sponsors are getting bored. So someone says, what if we put the medicine at the horn and make them run? But here's the real question. How do you keep the favorites alive without making the cheat obvious? With Katniss and Peter, the solution is plausible danger. You send the mutations when they're already exhausted. You unleash Cato at the exact time their relationship has peaked in the audience's mind. You change the rules to allow two winners only after the star-crossed lovers storyline has built enough hope that the Capitol can't resist. Then, when Snow panics about the symbol they've become, you revoke it. That part matters because it shows the line Seneca is walking. Serve the narrative, but pretend you're serving fairness. Now flip to Plutarch Heavensby. On paper, same job. In practice, totally different reason for every button he presses. We're going to cover the 75th more later, but inside that control room, Plutarch isn't thinking in episodes and cliffhangers. He's thinking in revolutions, the lightning tree, the spinning arena, the timed disasters. Those aren't just for spectacle. They're tools he can repurpose to break the force field and extract Katniss. Every random threat becomes a test of whether his secret allies can hit their marks. So imagine a specific moment. A tribute from a career district is cornered, a fan favorite in the capital. Do you send mutts to finish them, or a well-timed rain of fire to scatter the pack and give them one more big scene? In the 10th games, Snow literally rigged sponsor gifts, so certain tributes survived long enough to test new horrors. By the time of Seneca and Plutarch, that same instinct is just automated, quietly built into which pods are funded, which arenas get cutting-edge tech, which districts somehow keep producing victors, and all of this is happening under real constraints. Snow's directives about problem districts, sponsor demands for romance or blood, budget caps on how many mutts you can grow, how many hovercraft retrievals you can stage. The one thing a head game maker cannot allow is boredom. No stalemates. No anticlimactic off-screen deaths. So when the story drags, the weather shifts. When the wrong tribute is winning, the ground opens. In that environment, rigging isn't an exception. It's the job description. If your promise to the Capitol is a satisfying story every year, you will cheat to protect arcs and orchestrate climaxes. And what we see on the broadcast, the fire, the feasts, the big mutt attacks, is only the visible rigging, the tip of an iceberg of micro-adjustments. A delayed parachute here, a slightly poisoned water source there, a camera angle that convinces sponsors to send help. So when we ask how many games were rigged, we're really asking, how many tributes even got the chance to make a big move? And how many were edited out at the control panel? Hold on to that, because next we're going to step back from individual buttons and look at the long pattern across multiple games. When the script fights back, Katniss as a glitch. And when you zoom out to that long pattern, one tribute starts to glitch the whole thing. Katniss Everdeen is not supposed to be the main character of these games. At face value, the script wants a career from District 1 or 2. Pretty trained since childhood, excited interviews, clean narrative for the capital. Instead, you get a girl from a non-career district who only ends up in the spotlight because her little sister's name is pulled. The volunteer moment is standard for careers. In 12, it's a rupture. This is where we talk about unintended protagonists. The capital's narrative machine relies on predictable types, vicious careers, tragic underdogs, doomed romantics. Katniss overlaps with those roles but never fits them cleanly. She can hunt, but she isn't a professional killer. She doesn't flirt on command. Her relationship with Peter isn't a scripted romance. It's a survival strategy that starts to feel real in all the wrong ways for Snow. So what happens when the script miscasts its lead? The arena keeps bending around her. You watch the 74th and notice how many random events keep her in play. The wall of fire drives her straight towards the careers and Peter, forcing that relationship back onto the main stage. The Tracker-Jacker nest just happens to be above their camp, giving her a high-impact move and a sponsor-friendly moment of hallucinatory drama. Is that probability or programming? Then there's Rue. On paper, a small girl from District 11 shouldn't matter to capital ratings, but her alliance with Katniss creates a new emotional arc the audience can't look away from. Sponsors respond. Gifts arrive at exactly the moments that keep Katniss alive. Burn medicine, bread, broth. Here's the real question. Are sponsors freely choosing, or are the game makers curating which camera angles you see so that you want to send help to one tribute and not another? The clearest bend is the 2-victor rule change. Mid-games, the capital suddenly announces that tributes from the same district can both win. That part matters because it doesn't just reward Katniss and Peter, it validates the love story the show has been pushing. The rule literally rewrites itself to keep their narrative going. And when Snow realizes the symbol he's grown is too powerful, the rule snaps back. Revoked. No more double victory. Except Katniss does something the system isn't built for. She weaponizes the rigging. The Nightlock berries take the capital's own logic. We'll do anything for good television, and turn it into a trap. 2 suicides mean no victor, no promise, no hope for the districts. The games collapse as a product. So the capital caves, they restore the rule, and in doing so, they accidentally crown a symbol of resistance. Snow's response in the 75th proves the damage. Subtle nudges aren't enough anymore, so he escalates to overt political engineering. A quarter-quell twist that just happens to target victors, just happens to drag Katniss back into the arena, just happens to concentrate every problematic symbol in one kill box. The pretense of fairness is gone. The script is now openly a weapon, and that's the point. Katniss doesn't break a fair game. She exposes that it was never a game. She breaks a scripted show. Once the districts see rules rewritten for narrative convenience, they learn a dangerous lesson. If the capital can change the rules, so can you. Hold on to that thought, because next we're going to cover how earlier quarter-quells quietly rehearsed this same pattern of special rules long before Katniss ever raised those berries. Rigging as punishment. What happens when you outplay the capital? Those special rules don't stop when the cannon sounds for the final time. They just move off screen. If the quells are rehearsals for rule bending, the victors who outplay the capital are the stress tests. Here's the real question. What happens when someone wins a game they were never supposed to survive? The answer is, the capital rewrites reality after the fact, using punishment to retroactively prove that victory was conditional all along. This is where we talk about Haymitch. On paper, the 50th games already looked rigged as spectacle. Twice the tributes, a maze of traps, mutts everywhere. But Haymitch does something unforgivable. He uses the arena's force field as a weapon, turning the capital's own design against them. At face value, that's clever strategy. In Snow's mind, it's humiliation on live television. The response? They don't just ignore him, they erase him by killing everyone he loves back in District 12, one by one, until he understands the relationship. You can win the games, but you cannot win against the capital. That part matters because it reframes his quell. The arena wasn't just deadly, it was a test to produce a certain kind of victor. When the wrong kind emerges, a sarcastic, uncooperative rebel in waiting, the system compensates with targeted terror. His punishment is proof the capital didn't merely want a winner, it wanted a compliant winner who would sell the promise of hope, not the possibility of resistance. Then you have Finnick. On the surface, he's the perfect career success story. Handsome, lethal, adored by the capital. But we're going to cover the cost of that adoration. From the moment he wins young, he's turned into a product, sold and traded through Snow's network under threat of harm to people he loves. His talent becomes performance on demand. Why is that important for rigging? Because his post-games life shows that even favored victors are only safe as long as they perform the role assigned. The second his secrets and trauma go public in Mockingjay, he flips from capital fantasy to rebel symbol, and suddenly his survival is no longer guaranteed. Johanna Mason takes this even further. She wins by pretending to be weak, hiding her real skills until it's too late for anyone to counter her. That's already an insult to the narrative the capital wants. A brutal, honest fight, not a con. After she refuses to play the sweet, sexy, marketable victor, they strip her, torture her, and literally weaponize her fear of water. Why? Because she won the games but refused the script. Her suffering is punishment for breaking character. Once you see that pattern, Haymitch's force field, Finnick's exploitation, Johanna's torture all retroactively rig their arenas into trials of obedience. The capital wasn't just selecting who lived, it was selecting who would be useful afterward. The measure of how rigged a game was isn't only in mutts and rule changes, but in how dangerous the victor becomes once they step off the stage. So if punishment is the sequel to rigging, what happens when the capital tries to preempt that danger by choosing who even gets to be a victor in the first place? Off-page arenas. What the missing 71 games probably looked like. So if punishment is the sequel to rigging, what does that tell you about the missing games? If every time the capital feels threatened, they rewrite the script, here's the real question. How often did they do it when no one was around to write a memoir about it? We do have 4 anchor points. The 10th, the 50th, the 74th Hunger Games are canonically blatant. In the 10th, Gaul and a teenage Snow are secretly steering gifts, planting weapons and testing mutts. In the 50th, Haymitch's arena is a booby-trap nightmare, and when he outsmarts the force field, the mutts and rule reversals come out. In the 74th, the rule change for 2 victors, then the attempted revocation. In the 75th, a decades-old quell card that just happens to target existing victors. At face value, those are 4 separate scandals, but they all rely on the same toolkit: arena hazards, dialed up or down, sponsor bias, rule tweaks, and a political motive sitting underneath. That part matters because it shows you the relationship between spectacle and control. When Snow wants Lucy Gray to test new forms of fear, the hazards get experimental. When he wants Haymitch punished, the arena becomes personal. When he needs Katniss contained, sponsors and rules become weapons. So why would those tools only appear in the 4 games we see in detail? Statistically, that's backwards. If every time the camera lingers we catch the capital cheating, the reasonable assumption is not that the other 71 were models of integrity, it's that rigging is the default operating system and we just happened to catch it in the logs a few times. This is where we talk about eras. Early on, in the experimental decades, the capital is still figuring out what works. The 10th shows them openly tinkering with poisons, zoo cages, and betting. You'd expect more chaotic, brutal test arenas then, with gamekeepers using hazards as lab equipment. Later, during Snow's consolidation period, the games harden into a weapon of policy. Now the question isn't just who dies, it's which district needs a reminder, which budding victor needs to be broken, which mentor is getting too influential. By the pre-rebellion years, when Katniss comes in, the system is polished, almost boring on the surface. But the cheating is cleaner. Sponsor throttling, weather events, mutts tailored to specific tributes. And the Quarter Quells, the Capitol claims those twists were written 75 years in advance. The 75th alone blows that promise apart. If Snow can retrofit a Quell to target victors, why assume the 25th and 50th weren't also massaged to solve whatever problem existed that generation? Maybe the 25th was engineered to humiliate a district that almost rebelled. Maybe the 50th's hyper-lethal arena was meant to wipe out a cohort of tributes who'd grown up hearing too many stories of hope. So before we build a more systematic estimate, do a quick experiment. In your head right now, out of 75 games, how many do you think were rigged in some meaningful way? Hold that number, because next we're going to cover how the math of politics, not just probability, pushes that answer higher than the Capitol would ever admit. Is arena design itself a form of cheating? So you've got your number in your head, but before we lock it in, we have to ask something uncomfortable. What if the cheating starts before the tributes even step off the train? What if the arena itself is the first rig? At face value, the Capitol tells you each arena is just a fresh creative vision. New theme, new dangers, all in the name of spectacle. Water 1 year, forest the next, maybe an urban war zone after that. But here's the real question. When a water-heavy arena just happens to favor the swimmers from District 4, is that game design, or is that quiet favoritism dressed up as art? This is where we talk about bias that's baked into the map. A forested arena tilts toward hunters and foragers, so someone with Katniss's skill set suddenly has an invisible boost. A desert arena punishes districts that never see open sky, while kids from 7 or 11 who climb and work outdoors can read terrain better. Drop everyone into a high-tech puzzle box, and suddenly the tributes from more industrial districts, raised around machinery and hazards, have an edge. None of that is announced as a rule change, but it shapes who lives long enough to get sponsors, and that part matters because sponsors are where the obvious rigging usually shows up. So why does this matter for our count? Because the Capitol also has form when it comes to tailoring arenas to specific tribute pools. Look at the 50th games. The arena is stuffed with traps, force fields, and hidden horrors. On paper, that's just extra deadly for a Quarter Quell. In practice, it's an environment that rewards quick pattern recognition and rule breaking, which is exactly how Haymitch wins. And the second he uses the force field against them, the Gamemakers retaliate later by murdering everyone he loves. The relationship there is clear. The arena was their test, and he wasn't supposed to pass it. Jump to the 75th. The clock arena is segmented, hyper-structured, and built around timing, coordination, and alliance building. You're not just surviving, you're solving. Conveniently, this is the games where almost every tribute is already a victor, already media trained, already used to cooperating in training centers. Snow wants them on display. The arena obliges. So how much do game makers actually know before they lock in an arena? Officially, the Quell cards are written decades in advance, But we know Snow rewrites the 75th. We know head Gamemakers watch reapings, track training scores, and obsess over standout personalities. Is it really a stretch to imagine them nudging an arena toward more water when District 4 sends a promising career? Or toward more tech when they want to spotlight clever capital favorites and humiliate a problem district? If we decide that kind of preloaded bias counts as rigging, our math implodes. Suddenly, fair games would mean years where the arena doesn't obviously favor careers, doesn't showcase a particular district, doesn't seem custom-built for a narrative Snow wants. You're probably down to single digits. So the next step is brutal, separating emotional outrage from concrete evidence. Because now we have to ask, case by case, which games we can actually prove were bent, and which only feel that way. The math of cheating, estimating how many games were rigged. So if our outrage meter has to calm down for a second, how do you actually count cheating in a system that is cheating by design? This is where we talk about categories, because not all rigging looks the same on camera. At face value, you've got the loud, undeniable stuff, overt rule changes. The 74th games literally flipped the rulebook twice. First to promise 2 victors from the same district, then to yank that promise back when Katniss and Peter's relationship turns into a weapon the Capitol can't control. The 75th does it with the Quarter Quell card itself, reaping only victors. We're told that twist was written decades ago. We know that's a lie. Snow weaponizes the Quell to solve a political problem, not to honor a tradition. Then you have Quells in general, where the twist is supposed to be random but always just happens to serve the Capitol's needs. The 50th gives Haymitch an arena so overloaded with traps it borders on a lab experiment. When he breaks their toy with the force field trick, they don't just shrug, they send mutts, change the rules on the fly, and then murder his family after. That part matters because it shows the Quell design and the post-game's punishment are part of the same rig. So here's the real question. How many games do we put in each bucket? On a conservative estimate, you only count what's textually obvious. The 10th, where Dr. Gall and young Snow secretly rig sponsors, hide weapons and test new horrors. The 50th, blatantly over-engineered. The 74th, with its televised rule whiplash. The 75th, a political purge disguised as ceremony. You might throw in 1 or 2 more where mutts or natural disasters are transparently targeted. That gets you to maybe 4 to 6 games we can point to and say, yes, that was clearly manipulated. But if we move to a moderate estimate, we're going to cover a lot more ground. You include every Quarter Quell on the assumption that if 2 were rigged, the 3rd probably was. 2. You add arenas that obviously favor careers or showcase a district the Capitol wants to glorify. You count sponsor-driven outcomes where the Capitol's elites essentially vote with parachutes for who is allowed to survive. Suddenly, you're not in single digits anymore. You're in the 30 to 50 range, where at least half the games are bent toward a preferred narrative. And then there's the maximalist view. What if the entire structure is the cheat? Careers trained from childhood, peacekeepers encouraging volunteers, mentors who can or can't pull sponsors, districts starved or indulged before the reaping. If you treat all of that as rigging, then almost all 75 games qualify as fixed from the starting line. In the end, the exact number matters less than the pattern. The arena was never meant to be a neutral test of survival. It was always a curated story. The real suspense isn't who wins. It's who the Capitol decides is allowed to win. And in the next section, we have to ask what happens when that decision suddenly stops working. Pattern interrupt. Flipping the question. Which games weren't rigged? So if almost every arena is a curated story, here's the real question. Were there any games that weren't? Pattern interrupt. Instead of hunting for every hidden wire the Capitol pulled, flip the camera. Ask the weirder question. Could any Hunger Games have been so boringly efficient, so politically safe, that Snow barely had to touch them? A true low-intervention bloodbath where the game makers just let it run. To find those, we have to rewind. Back to the early years, before force fields and holograms and climate dials, when the arenas were basically abandoned stadiums with landmines. The capital was broke, traumatized from the war, and still figuring out what this annual horror show even was. You don't have sponsor parachutes in year 10 the way you do in year 70. That part matters, because heavy rigging requires infrastructure, cameras, betting networks, secure communications with mentors, a head game maker who can trigger a firestorm with one button. In Ballad, we see the 10th games being manipulated, but it's messy, improvised, experimental. Dr. Gall and Snow are testing control, not running a sleek scripted product yet. So, is it possible that somewhere between those chaotic proto-games and the hyper-produced 74th, there were years where the arena design itself did most of the work, and the capital barely intervened? Here's where we're going to cover criteria. If we're going to talk about a non-rigged games in this universe, what would it even look at face value? Minimal arena intervention after the starting gong. No mid-games rule changes, no politically sensitive tributes, no singers from rebellious districts, no victors with personal history with Snow, no obvious problem families, and a winner who already fits capital narratives. Maybe a career from District 2 who looks good on camera, believes in the system, and doesn't need extra sponsor pushes to survive. Now ask yourself, in a politically stable stretch, say long before Katniss, long after the Dark Days, why would Snow micromanage every single year? If the districts are quiet, the victors obedient, and the ratings acceptable, there is a lot to uncover here about his risk calculus. The safest move is to let the standard arena brutality do the job. The games still terrify the districts. The capital still gets its spectacle, and Snow conserves his more obvious interference for years when the narrative is at risk. So imagine being in Panem, parked in front of your screen, for one of those rare, brutally honest games. No surprise feast. No mutation twist, just kids from every district tearing each other apart in a landscape that doesn't suddenly flood or freeze on command. Would that honesty feel more fair or more horrifying? When you can't blame a fireball or a rule change, you're forced to confront the real system, the reapings, the tesserae, the fact that your district's children never had a chance. And here's the uncomfortable twist. Those non-rigged games might be the purest expression of what the capital wanted the relationship between districts and arena to be. No hope, no loopholes, just obedience. So what happens when even that stops working and the audience starts rooting for the script to break? Audience complicity. When capital viewers become co-cheaters. So if the script starts to crack, who's really holding the pen? Because once you zoom out from the arena, you realize the capital audience isn't just watching the games, they're playing them. This is where we talk about those watch parties in the city circle, the themed cocktails, the betting lounges where odds update in real time. At face value, it feels familiar. Reality TV blown up to imperial scale. You don't just sit on your couch. You pledge to a tribute. You fund sponsor campaigns. You argue over who deserves a parachute. The arena is hundreds of miles away, but the relationship between you and that starving kid from District 11 is suddenly very personal. We're going to cover sponsors more later, but here's the real question right now. Who decides which tribute gets a life-saving burn ointment, or bread, or medicine? In the 74th games, it's not just Haymitch's strategy, it's the crowd's appetite. Katniss becomes the girl on fire, and suddenly the capital can't get enough of her. That part matters, because once a tribute becomes a ratings asset, the game makers have a reason to quietly protect that investment. You see it in the way the arenas are tuned. Popular tributes get engineered showdowns instead of random accidents. The careers are herded toward dramatic clashes. Katniss and Peeta are pushed together with cave floods and romantic feasts. Meanwhile, boring tributes die off-screen in fog banks, mutt attacks, or convenient natural hazards. Is that really chance? Or is the control room curating a season arc the way a producer stacks a reality show cast? And once you admit that, the next step is ugly. The capital citizens aren't just complicit because they enjoy it. Their desires are the justification. Snow and the head game maker can say, the people want a love story, the people want a bloodbath, the people are bored. Every intervention fires to drive tributes together, feast invitations, sudden rule changes, can be framed as fan service instead of cheating. That creates a powerful moral buffer. If the crowd demanded 2 victors, then allowing Katniss and Peeta to win isn't rigging, it's listening to the audience. When that same crowd starts to turn on Katniss, revoking the rule change becomes course correction, not a political hit job. The Capitol tells itself it's just responding to ratings, but the real reason is always control over the districts. And here's where it gets uncomfortably close to home. You've seen shows renewed because they trend, contestants edited into heroes or villains because that's what keeps you watching. The Hunger Games just takes that logic to its horrific conclusion. The more the Capitol treats tributes as content, the easier it is to forget their children. The more we, as readers and viewers, enjoy the spectacle of clever twists, the more the story quietly asks, are you sure you're only blaming the game makers? Because if the audience can be weaponized this easily, what happens the moment they start cheering for the wrong victor? District memory. How rumors of cheating spread or don't. So if the audience can be weaponized, here's the real question. What do the districts actually know about any of this? Because the Capitol isn't just editing the arena, it's editing memory. At face value, a district only sees one thing: the broadcast. The glossy, spliced-together version of the games, where dead tributes are turned into tasteful montages and the worst manipulation is cut or reframed as natural hazards. You're not seeing Dr. Gaull's secret bets in the 10th, or the force field math behind Haymitch's victory in the 50th. You're seeing a story the Capitol needs you to believe. So why does that matter? Because information is the first arena. Most people in District 12 grow up the way Katniss does, assuming the arena is brutal, but basically neutral. Fire? That's just part of the show. Mutts? Horrifying, but rules of the game. The idea that the game makers are constantly adjusting odds in real time doesn't fully land for her until she's inside, being herded by fire toward the careers, or watching the feast at the cornucopia engineered as a bloodbath. There is a lot to uncover here. Katniss's learning curve is probably the template for most of Panem. First, you accept the games as fate. Then you notice the edges, sudden weather shifts, conveniently timed parachutes, the way popular tributes somehow get more sponsors. Only later do you realize that popularity itself is partially rigged by the edit, by what the Capitol chooses to show your district on that giant screen in the square. This is where we talk about victors as dangerous memory leaks. Haymitch has literally seen the control room in action. Chaff, Cedar, Johanna, they all understand, to different degrees, that the arena is a machine with operators. Do they go home and give the full TED Talk on rigging to every 12-year-old? Probably not. There's trauma, there's surveillance, and there's the very real question, if I teach my tribute how the system cheats, am I also teaching them how hopeless this relationship with the Capitol really is? But some things still slip through. Haymitch's sarcasm about the random 75th reaping, Cedar's quiet support for Katniss, Johanna's open contempt on camera, Those are cracks the districts can see. Stories travel. The tale of the girl who used berries to beat the games doesn't stay a news segment. It becomes a folk story about a victor who forced the capital to cheat in public. The 75th's twist, only victors in the reaping, exposes the lie that the Quell rules were written decades ago. People in the districts may not have proof, but they can smell a rigged draw. And that part matters because the more visible the cheating, the weaker the promise at the heart of the games. If the capital can change the rules whenever a tribute becomes too beloved, then victory isn't proof of their power anymore. It's proof of their fear. Hope turns sour. Resentment grows. You start to wonder, if the capital is this scared of a few victors, what else are they hiding about how the games really work? Rigging and rebellion, when the games lose their spell. So if the cheating keeps getting louder, what happens to a system that's built on pretending it's fair? This is where we talk about the games not just as murder, but as ritual. A ritual only works if everyone agrees the rules are real, even when they hurt. Back then, in the early years, the terror is raw. The 10th Hunger Games are barely a spectacle. The arena is a ruined stadium. The tributes are starving, and Dr. Gall and young Snow are openly experimenting. Secret weapons, rigged sponsor gifts, rule-bending tests. At face value, it's chaos. But here's the real question. What are they testing? The answer is how far they can rig the games and still sell them as fate. By the time you reach the 50th, the spectacle has matured. The arena is an enormous, deadly playground. Haymitch's Quell is advertised as a special treat for the viewers, a once-in-a-quarter-century event. But the force field, the sudden mutt attack when he outsmarts them, the way the capital hunts down his loved ones after he wins, there is a lot to uncover here. The message to the districts is simple. Outthinkers, and we will rewrite the script. Then the 74th happens, and the script tears on live television. You watch the rule change that allows 2 victors. Hope spikes. Maybe the games can be beaten on their own terms. But when Katniss and Peter become too beloved, the rule is yanked back. That part matters because it exposes the relationship between audience approval and capital fear. People in every district see the mask slip. The rules aren't sacred, they're customer service. The 75th goes even further, the so-called decades-old twist to reap only victors. We know Snow engineers it specifically to eliminate symbols of defiance. Overnight, the promise of safety for a victor is revoked. Victor's village, all that wealth and distance, suddenly looks less like a reward and more like a holding pen. So why keep playing a game where winning just paints a target on your back? And then Plutarch walks in, a head game maker who's technically the high priest of this ritual, secretly working for the rebels. We're going to cover his plan in more depth later, but the short version is brutal. He uses every rigging tool the capital invented: clock arena, timed lightning, wire, allies, to blow the arena apart. The games don't just malfunction, they self-destruct. Here's the pattern interrupt. For the first time, the audience doesn't just see tributes die, they see the arena die. Once that happens, the spell breaks. If the games are scripted, then the capital's violence isn't destiny, it's a choice. And if it's a choice, it can be refused. Districts start to imagine something wild, a world where there are no games at all. In the end, the capital doesn't just lose a TV show, it loses the illusion that its cruelty is orderly, fair, or inevitable. And that's the moment when rebellion stops being fantasy and starts being strategy. Speculative segment. Designing a perfectly rigged Hunger Games. So if rebellion starts when people realize the games are scripted, here's the real question. What does a perfectly scripted Hunger Games actually look like from the inside? Imagine you're not a tribute this time. You're head game maker for, say, the 63rd Hunger Games. Snow calls you in, very calm, very polite, and he gives you a simple, terrifying assignment. A specific tribute must win. Maybe a promising career from District 2, maybe a capital favorite from a poorer district to refresh the narrative. Your job is to deliver that victor without making the rigging obvious. At face value, the rules don't change. Names are drawn. The arena is random. But this is where we talk about tools. You choose an arena that naturally favors your tribute's strengths. Dense ruins for a stealthy climber, open plains for a long-range fighter, heavy forests if they're good with snares. Then you layer in hazards, fires, floods, mutts, poison fog, the way a writer plans plot twists. Not cheating, you insist, just entertainment. We're going to cover how those tools actually work. Step 1. Cull the threats. You schedule an accidental landslide on day 3, right as 3 dangerous rivals are converging on a water source. The cameras frame it as a tragic coincidence. Ratings spike. Your chosen tribute, safely out of range, nudged there the day before by a minor food shortage on their side of the map. Next beat, the feast. Canon gives us the cornucopia feasts, the medicine feasts, the quarter-quell traps. You announce a mid-games event with crucial supplies for everyone, but you control the layout. The deadliest careers are funneled through a narrow kill zone patrolled by mutts. Your tribute's bag is placed closer to cover, maybe even stocked with an extra weapon they happen to know how to use. Is that rigging, or just clever design for maximum drama? Then, there are sponsors. We've seen how Snow and the Gamemakers quietly steered gifts in the 10th games, how a single vial or loaf of bread can decide who lives. You don't send your tribute endless parachutes. That's too obvious. You wait, you let them suffer. And then, at the exact moment dehydration becomes fatal, a canteen appears. The audience calls it a heroic save from a generous capital patron. You know it was a pre-approved nudge. That part matters because plausible deniability is your real arena. Every intervention must have a ratings explanation. More mutts? The games were getting slow. Sudden rule clarification that favors your tribute's alliance. You're just enforcing no tampering with force fields. Very Haymitch coded. Nothing personal. A storm that breaks up an underdog alliance from a problem district? Weather has always been part of the show. So after walking through this hypothetical, here's the question. Does it feel more or less believable that most real games were quietly engineered this way? And if almost every victor was chosen long before the arena ever lit up, what does that do to the relationship between the districts, their so-called hope, and the capital's promise of fairness in the first place? Reframing the victors, survivors, symbols, or chosen pieces. If the games are scripted, then every victor you thought beat the system might actually be someone the system chose to keep. So here's the real question. When we rewatch the arena with that in mind, what happens to the way we see Lucy Gray, Haymitch, Finnick, Johanna, and Katniss? Start with Lucy Gray. At face value, she's the scrappy songbird who outsmarts everyone in the 10th games. But the lore shows Snow nudging sponsors, rigging gifts, and bending rules to test new control methods. Her survival intersects perfectly with the capital's need for spectacle and data. She wins, but only inside an experiment she never consented to. Is that victory? Or successful lab rat behavior? Haymitch is the next step in that pattern. The 50th is special, stuffed with traps, then flooded with mutts when he uses the force field in a way the capital didn't predict. They could have killed him in the arena. Instead, they let him win, then butcher everyone he loves afterward. His games are rigged both ways. First to see who can survive the nightmare arena, then to make sure the victor never forgets who really holds the power. Finnick? He's practically a capital-sponsored project. The arena in his year is a perfect stage for a beautiful, charismatic killer who can win fast and clean. Sponsors adore him. The capital turns him into a weapon and a reward, trading his body for secrets. His victory is engineered to produce a symbol of glamorous hope for the districts and a private toy for the elite. Johanna's win is messier, but you can still feel the script. She comes from a timber district that's useful but not beloved. The capital doesn't need her as a fairy tale. They need her as proof that brutality works. Whatever arena she faced, the end result is the same. A victor who understands the games are rigged, refuses to play sweet, and gets punished for it. And then Katniss, the most obvious rigging case. Rule changes mid-games, mutts unleashed on command, parachutes that always seem to arrive at the exact narrative beat the capital needs. Her survival is constantly balanced between ratings, politics, and Snow's terror of losing control. She's both the product and the glitch in the system. So does knowing this diminish their skill, or does it highlight how terrifyingly good you have to be to navigate a script that wants to use you? There is a lot to uncover here, because the real horror is psychological. Imagine realizing your earned victory might have been allowed. Your talent didn't cancel the games, it just made you the most profitable outcome. That part matters because it feeds everything we see after. Addiction, rage, withdrawal, rebellion. If your win is also your leash, every capital party is a reminder that your district's hope is built on a lie. This is where we talk about the double bind. You're a symbol of hope at home, a tool of control in the capital, and you know both roles are scripted. So when you reframe victors as extraordinary survivors and manipulated pieces at the same time, their stories don't get weaker. They get sharper, more tragic, and more powerful. Which raises one more question we're going to cover next. If the capital is writing the script, what happens to the few victors who try to grab the pen back? So, how many games were rigged? Final answer, sort of. So if the capital is writing the script, here's the real question. How many Hunger Games were actually rigged? And how many only felt that way to the tributes trapped inside? On paper, you're told it's random, impartial, a pure fight to the death. At face value, the arena is the great equalizer, but there is a lot to uncover here when you line the lore up side by side. Start with the easy column, the ones the story itself calls out. The 10th games are basically a live experiment, with Dr. Gall and young Snow bending rules, sneaking in weapons, and secretly steering sponsors so certain tributes survive. The 50th is engineered as an overstuffed death trap, then course-corrected with mutts and reversals. The second Haymitch breaks their design. The 74th has that infamous mid-games rule change for 2 victors, and the spiteful attempt to yank it back. The 75th? The twist isn't a twist at all. Snow weaponizes the quell to purge victors who threaten him. Those 4 are openly, undeniably rigged. Now zoom out. We've already seen how sponsor gifts, feast traps, weather mutts, and arena layouts quietly tilt the board. Career districts get training, prestige, and arenas that reward frontal combat. Problem districts get environments that punish their skills. Think District 12 kids dropped into controlled forest fires, or tributes funneled into the cornucopia with no real way around it. That part matters because the Gamemakers don't just respond to chaos, they curate it, protecting the capital's favorites and punishing symbols they don't control. So what's the final count? We can give 3 answers depending on how strict you want to be. Conservative, 4 to 6 games where we have explicit textual rigging or quell twists that change who can even be reaped. Moderate, around 30 to 50, where you factor in stacked arenas, sponsor manipulation, and targeted sabotage that clearly push certain victors and districts forward. And then the systemic view, essentially all 75, because the entire structure is designed so the capital can intervene whenever the narrative or the politics demand it. This is where we talk about my read. I land between the moderate and systemic answers. Why? Because once you accept that game makers can trigger a fire, starve an area, or drop mutts on command, the distinction between show control and outcome control gets very thin. The games only function as propaganda if the right kind of victor survives. Useful, marketable, not too rebellious, until Snow miscalculates. And remember the core relationship here. The capital's goal was never fairness. It was fear, then habit, then spectacle. The more we learn about how the games work behind the scenes, the less sense a truly non-rigged arena makes. A game where anyone could win is a game where the capital might lose. So I'll call it, functionally, almost every Hunger Games is rigged. But that's a starting point, not a verdict. How many do you count once you weigh your own evidence, your own definition of cheating? Because next, we're going to cover what happens when a few victors start treating that rigged system as something they can hack back. What this changes about watching the Hunger Games. So what does all of that actually do to the way you watch the Hunger Games? Once you start seeing the arena as a rigged stage instead of a neutral battlefield, you can't really watch it the same way. Every time the camera cuts to a reaping, a sponsor gift, or some random arena hazard, there is a lot to uncover here. You start asking a new question. Who benefits if this happens right now? Take the reapings. At face value, they're pure chance. 2 names, pulled from a bowl, the same ritual in every district. But once you know Snow personally medals in the 10th Games, once you see how the career districts produce perfect telegenic tributes year after year, you can't help it. You watch Prim's name, or ruse, and your brain adds a quiet, or did someone want this? What happens when you re-watch Rue's death, assuming the game makers are treating her as a narrative beat, not a person? Suddenly the timing of the tracker-jacker attack, the way the cameras linger on Katniss singing, the flowers, the salute from District 11, none of that feels organic. It feels curated. The capital isn't just letting tragedy happen, it's scheduling it for maximum impact and maximum control. Cato's final stand shifts too. On first watch, he's the last big boss. Brutal career, cornered on the cornucopia. But this is where we talk about the mutt attack as a production choice. The mutts don't just appear, they arrive exactly when the tension between Katniss, Peeta and Cato needs a bloody crescendo. When you ask who benefits, the answer is clear. The show, the regime, the relationship between spectacle and fear. Same with those mutts made from fallen tributes in Haymitch's Quell and Katniss's games. That part matters, because it's not just horror for horror's sake, it's the capital literally rewriting the dead into props. Once you see the games as a scripted collaboration between media and power, the whole thing turns into an allegory for how real-world institutions edit footage, choose angles, and decide whose pain gets airtime. And this doesn't make the victors less impressive. It does the opposite. If the games are fixed, surviving them means you've beaten other kids and an entire system that is actively trying to write you out. Katniss hacking the rule change with the berries, Haymitch using the force field, even Lucy Gray turning the arena into a performance. All of that becomes a miracle pulled off inside a rigged casino. So when you go back to the books or the films, you're not just watching action scenes anymore, you're watching people fight the script. You feel more anger because the cheating is constant. But you also feel more awe because hope keeps breaking through anyway. And if the capital can rig a story that hard, what happens when victors learn to rig it back on purpose? Join the Victors' Council. Your turn to call out the cheating. That's where you come in. If the capital keeps stacking the deck, then we need our own game maker team out here in Victor's Village, pulling the rigging apart on purpose. So here's the real question for you. How many Hunger Games do you think were rigged? not just nudged, fully, deliberately tilted so a specific tribute, district, or outcome never really had a choice. Drop your number in the comments and then tell me which specific games you want a full breakdown of next. Do you want us to go back to Haymitch's 50th and walk through every force field, mutt and rule twist that proved the arena hated him personally? Or are you more interested in Phoenix's Mystery Arena, where we have to reverse engineer the traps from the victor he became? There is a lot to uncover here, and your picks decide which rigged nightmare we put on the dissecting table. You can also throw in your wild cards, a speculative all-water games in District 4's backyard, built to guarantee a career victor and sell the romance of the sea to the rest of Panem. A landmine-heavy early-era arena where sponsors and secret bets did more killing than the tributes. At face value, these are just hypotheticals. But that part matters because the pattern of cheating we've already seen gives us real rules for how the Capitol would design those arenas. This is where we talk about what this channel actually is. If you're new here, we're going to cover Hunger Games lore the way the Capitol would never approve. Political analysis of Snow's decisions, deep dives into how each district fits into the system, and world-building speculation that treats Panem as a real place with real incentives. We sit in our little digital victor's village and ask why the games were built this way, what relationship each victor has to power, and how propaganda rewrites the story after the blood dries. So if you want to be part of that ongoing conversation, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications on. Think of it as joining a kind of Victor's Council. Every time a new video drops, you're one of the first people deciding which clues we follow, which quarter quell we interrogate, which random rule we put on trial. You're not just watching breakdowns, you're steering which parts of Panem's history get put under the microscope next. Tell me your rigged games count. Call out the arena you want to see exposed in its own episode. Because the Capitol may have rigged the games, but here at least, you get to help write the script.